Welcome to today's RUC People. I'm very happy to be joined by Kathi Clarke, who is with us for a few weeks, back temporarily from Scotland. So welcome, Kathi.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. And Kathi, I think, is known to many of you and has been part of our community here at RUC for a while, but more recently been away. And therein lies a story, I think. So, Kathi, tell us how you found your way to Scotland and why you're still there.
Okay, so to answer that accurately, I've got to go back to, it was about February 2020. I'd been working in my current profession as an industrial psychologist and a business coach for 15 or so years, time for a break. Bryony, my daughter, was in the process of graduating from school. And so the question came, what next for me? And after a long sort of family conference, we decided that it was time to spread my wings. So I actually had booked to do a trek in the Andes and a trip around Peru involving the Amazon and Machu Picchu. And then I was earmarked to go to Las Vegas to do some training for international business coaches. And then from there, I was going to go to Scotland and have a 5-week sabbatical. And I got to do Peru, and it was awesome. I got to do the training in Las Vegas, and as I left, it closed behind me. And as I landed in Scotland for my sabbatical, COVID hit and the country locked down. So I found myself stuck overseas, unable to get home. I managed to organize accommodation for about 30 days in an Airbnb, and then they shut that down. Mm-hmm. I couldn't rent anything. So on the back of the discussion with Bryony and my mum that it was time to spread my wings and see what the rest of the world had to offer, I just thought, okay, and I bought a house. And
a house where?
A house just outside Edinburgh in a place called Musselburgh. It's about an 8-minute train ride into the city centre. It's a little coastal town, and it's called the Honest Town, and it appealed to me. So I bought a little lock-up-and-go flat and decided to fast-forward immigrating. So poor Friday had to pack up home remotely with me. She had the camera out, and I was saying, pack that, don't pack that, pack that, don't pack that. And I immigrated during COVID. I bought a house during COVID, and I started a new life in a strange town, locked inside 4 walls, which was interesting because that went on for almost 2 years. Because I was a psychologist, whenever I said that to anybody, they assumed that I was essential. And I just thought, well, I'll leave it at that, because that allowed me to travel on transport, to go out and exercise, and to see great swathes of the UK, granted alone, but because people thought I was essential, and essential people were allowed freedom of movement. So I have had the advantage of seeing all the very adorable closes that go off the Royal Mile in Edinburgh completely without people. I was able to take pictures in Machu Picchu where it was just me in this stunning background and no crowds. I have been to places where ordinarily you would queue for hours and seen them close up with not a single other person there. And it was an interesting time to be in a place where I knew no one, in a place where I could call no one, and in a place where if something happened, no one around me would immediately know. My lifelines were WhatsApp to my family, Rob's podcasts, and Netflix. And then, of course, all my clients who we were able to pivot online.
So you managed to just keep working.
Keep working.
So did the sabbatical actually happen? Did you take 5 weeks off in Scotland before you started working, or did you?
No. I just went straight into panic mode and then had to cope, work out what the heck do we do now that the whole world has changed beyond recognition literally overnight. So the sabbatical didn't happen. Went straight into working remotely and internationally, registering a business, moving home and setting up camp in Scotland.
And there's a transition there between being stuck with COVID and having left with a view to coming back, and then saying, actually, no, I'm not coming back, I'm staying. And at what point did that click? And does it still feel right?
I'm trying to think now how many years ago. I can remember doing a business presentation at a charismatic church in KZN. And one of the lasses who had a prophetic ministry, I suppose you would call it, came up to me and said that she felt that God was calling me to be, let me get this right, a Joseph, going off into foreign lands with a brightly colored coat, which I quite like the sound of. And I've had the sense for about the last 5 years that I would be moving on, that Cape Town wasn't the final destination, and that it was something bigger. I wasn't necessarily sure what. And because it was bigger, it was scary, and so I was quite happy not to have to deal with it. Then I kind of got swallowed up by the belly of the whale, and I found myself over there, and I thought, okay, let me take a chance. Let me see whether this is the casting off, the moving out, the going to bigger places. Scotland are my father's roots, and so I have history there. I've always loved Scotland because of the air, the outdoorsiness, and the directness of the people. And I wanted an adventure. One of my heartfelt desires as a divorcee, reluctant divorcee of 15 years, was where and how do I meet somebody else? I had, my daughter will tell you nicely, a fairly checkered experience online dating. Actually, it was rubbish. It was rubbish. That was the bottom line. It was rubbish online dating. And when I spoke to people like Annette and other psychologists, fellow psychologists, they said to me that being a woman in her 50s, being a business owner, being essentially a strong woman, this probably wasn't the most optimal place to be looking for a life partner. And so that was another reason for me to say, I'm 50-something, I'm too young. I'd love to do relationship again and do it well. And I would love to meet someone who sees me as an equal, not necessarily as a fan or staff, or the various roles that were often suggested by people that I'd met. It was almost looking for someone who was my tribe. I'm originally from Zimbabwe, and so South Africa's not, it's been home, but it's not my home country. And I've often felt a bit like a fish out of water. So it was trying to find people who were like me, and a sense that if I could be in a bigger pond, the chances of meeting someone were greater. So it was part personal, part work, part God. I guess it always is. And so opportunity presented itself, and so I thought, oh, what the heck, let's have an adventure. So I became a Scottish resident. I'm in the process of financially tax immigrating, which is interesting. Pivoted the business, and then just joined a whole lot of clubs when COVID finished and things opened up. I joined cold water swimming. I joined hiking. I started cycling. And through that, met Neil down in the Lake District. And so part of now is that I've had to sell and pack up my little house in Scotland because Neil is based down in Croston, and after 18 months of getting to know each other and dating, he asked me to marry him a couple of months ago. And so the families met him, and
you
so
said yes.
I said yes. And so I'm going to be moving down to where he's currently based for work, which is about 45 minutes away from both Liverpool and Manchester, in a little town called Croston, which is nearest to somewhere called Preston. It's a little English town, and from there I'll be able to do the work I do, and we're going to give this long-term relationship thing a bash.
Wonderful.
So, yes, so that's what I'm doing currently.
And why are you back here?
So why am I back here? So one of the things that in order to be able to travel the world and work from wherever, I needed to be more portable in my work. And one of the things around that was to say, how can I translate and leverage what I teach business owners into a format that can spread? And so the answer was to write a book. So that was originally what the whole sabbatical in Scotland was about. I was going to be J.K. Rowling writing a bestseller in one of those little coffee shops. Anyway, so one of the things I did while I was over there was write the book, which is called Piece by Piece. And it's a practical guide to stepping up or starting over in business and life. And it basically charts my story, the story of many of my clients, and some of the proven strategies that are needed to recalibrate life, start or restart a business on a limited budget. And it's particularly aimed at single parents who often they're not out of choice. It's their seismic change, it's their new reality, their new normal. They're having to make a living, run a business, do something to fund life. And how can you do that? So that was my position when I arrived in this country from East Africa 15 years ago. And so I've leveraged that into a book that's now going on Amazon. It's going into the South African and the UK bookshops. And so part of coming back now was to do the audible recording, to connect with publicity, to finalize the final proofs. And we've just hit go on the first print.
Wonderful. So just tell us a little bit more about your business, what it is that you do.
Okay, so what I basically do is I connect with small business owners, small to medium business owners, who are wanting to either grow, fix, scale, or exit their businesses. And I work with them on a retainer basis, seeing them on a fortnightly rhythm. And we start off with an alignment of what is your net present position, where is it that you want to get to, which is often not very well defined. Business owners will tell you they've got it in their head, but no one else really knows what it is. Or it's too vague to actually be a destination. And then we work out how we're going to get from where they are to where they need to be and over what time span. And then we break that down into accountable sort of milestones on the way. And then I'm there as a resource, part business coach, part business school, part psychologist, part counselor, part friend, part accountability, part sanity check. Basically, whatever they need to help them move from where they are to where they need to be. So to give you an example, I had someone come to see me and she learned the harp in 3 years and was basically doing harp stuff at the Barleycorn and for events. And she came to me and said, how can I turn this into a business? And I've worked with her for the last 3.5, maybe 4 years. And now she's turning over 6 figures. She's got 1,000 clients on retainer, all of them in the States. Some of them are blind. And she's employed her 2 sisters and 7 other staff members. We've turned what she does, playing the harp and teaching that to other people, into a largely online business that feeds her, her husband, her 2 sisters, their husbands, and the 7 other staff who work for them, all from playing the harp. So that's an example of what I do.
Okay, so let's go back a bit.
Okay.
So tell us where it all started for you. You said you from
Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe initially.
Yes.
Yes.
So I was born and grew up in Zimbabwe. I'm the older sister. I have a younger brother who's in Australia. And we left there in the early 80s when my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And like many Zimbabweans, left everything behind. And he died a couple of months after we got to Pietermaritzburg, which is where he needed to go for treatment. And we didn't do very well as a family. We had very little money. And I guess I was looking for a fresh start. So I did 1 year of school, finished, and then I went to whatever university no one from my class was going to, which happened to be Rhodes. And I actually did a journalism degree, and psychology was my other major. And then I qualified and spent time, I was actually a reporter on the Cape Times, working under Marianne Tam, but I don't think she remembers me because I was really a youngster. It was a long time ago. And then I worked in advertising agencies, then I worked in human resources, and then I went back to university, studied part-time, did my industrial psychology honors and masters and qualified as a psychologist, did my internship here, and then moved to Africa, which is where I met Bryony's dad. And
When you say Africa.
it's a bit vague, hey? So
54 countries to choose from.
So what I did was I left Cape Town with a backpack and a change of clothes, and I just went north. So I went through, after I qualified, so that was, I went through Zimbabwe, Malawi, Mozambique, Zambia, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, DRC, and the Republic of Congo. That's about it, Ethiopia.
A backpack, and were you on buses or?
Local transport.
Right.
And I went for about a year, and I met Bryony's dad while I was traveling, and then left him there and went for another year through Europe, started in Istanbul, and then sort of worked my way. I think the only place I didn't go was Scandinavia because it's too expensive. And then when I finished that, I went back to Uganda, and Bryony was born while we lived there and grew up in Tanzania. And it was really happy until it wasn't. And then when that ended, we came to South Africa because that's where my mother is.
Okay. So wonderful. And your current business, you know, how did that evolve, you know, from being a psychologist, but then kind of almost being a business coach? That's an interesting combination.
So I guess out of necessity is the short answer, because when I landed here in 2009, it was right at the start of the recession and the mess in the banks and the global crisis. And I was basically unemployable. I'd been working as a sort of consultant to big business, country representative, that sort of thing. And I was unemployable. I'd been earning a fat big salary which couldn't be matched here, and especially if I was going to be a mum as a single parent. So I needed to start something on my terms, and that was where I kind of became my own first client. I said, well, what have I got that's available? What do I love doing? What's my sense of purpose? Can I get paid for doing this? Is anyone else doing this? And then I happened upon this thing called business coaching, which is really just industrial psychology in action. I had a lot of business experience in Africa. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just help small businesses. They could sure do with it. And then having tried it, I found that I had an ability to make complex things simple, things accessible, and clients that I worked with started to get results. So I became a business coach. And what I found was that a lot of what you deal with as a business owner is what's going on inside here. it's having a very real enough vision that it will pull you through a lot of the setbacks and challenges. It's having the mental resilience to look at things, difficulties as challenges, and stuff that's hard as opportunities, to see failure as a teacher. And a lot of success is simply about how do you mentally position yourself to ride this thing. I mean, owning a business is like riding a lion. You know, it's exhilarating, but sometimes you think it's going to kill you or turn around and eat you. And how do you hold on to a mental sense of, I can do this? How do you hold on to self-belief that what you're offering is worthwhile, it's worth being paid for? How do you knuckle down and bring out your inner cheetah and deal with the new competencies you have to learn, how do you do all of that? And the answer is if you've got enough why power, as human beings, we can literally do anything. But I found that quite a lot of psychology and helping the business owner in terms of a sense of identity and some of their misgivings, flawedness, issues, challenges, insecurities had to be dealt with. So I found that actually being a businesswoman and a psychologist was a unique selling point, which put me in quite an interesting spot, especially for single parents who end up having to support themselves, often in a business, but not by choice, by default. And therefore had a fair degree of woundedness. Just like you have to fix yourself, find a measure of peace, and then you can start a business, because you can't do the full contact sport of a business on the back of an unreadiness or personal brokenness. So I found the two married together and put me in quite a unique position. So.
And I gather it's been very successful, and now managing to do it anywhere in the world, Scotland, for example. I assume various international clients, and, and can work online, and So change of tack. How did you find your way to RUC, and what was a little bit of the faith journey that brought you here?
So I've had a stubborn insistence that God is real, because as a psychologist, and also just as a kid searching and having the death of a parent so early, whose hand do you hold when the hand you normally hold isn't there anymore? And life can often rob you of the hands that you would hold. So very early on at 15, I started looking for, where is that big hand? People talk about its existence, so it must be there. Too much of what I see around me is created. It has to be created. It's too orderly, it's too intricate, it's too complex. So who is this creator, and where is that big hand? So I started searching by hanging around with those people who had a faith and clearly looked real, and encountered God in the short run. And then it was about trying to find some kind of faith community in my language. And so I've been all kinds of things. I've been a Baptist, I've been Assemblies, I've been whatever, wherever there was a church. I mean, I've lived in little towns that you've never even heard of. And so just trying to find a faith community in my language will do. And when I came to South Africa, my big thing as not African, and my mum's roots are Jewish, was to try and find a multiracial. It's one of the reasons why I left South Africa. I kept getting into trouble for being outspoken and very insistent that a lot of what I was seeing in workplaces and things was just racism that I found really, really hard to deal with. And I couldn't square away with my experiences that you just don't live life like that. And so I've completely forgotten where I was going.
No, I was asking about your faith journey and how you found your way here.
So I was looking for somewhere that was multiracial. That was not that easy to find. And then I was looking for somewhere that was dignified everybody. I found the whole focus on gender and women hard to deal with in many churches. I was looking for somewhere that was more inclusive. I was looking for somewhere that dignified women. I was looking for somewhere that didn't throw out the baby with the bathwater, but was much more contextual with some of the issues we're dealing with. I wanted an environment that looked at what we were doing with the earth and where we are, and there's no planet B. So why are Christians not better at looking after or stewarding this earth? Why is that not an agenda item? And then I was looking for somewhere that I'm a social justice warrior. So why is the church not a voice, like a resonant voice, speaking up for some of the things that are clearly wrong? And my mum actually came because we had a little wee house over the road in Erin Road, and Mum came here one day, and she said, "You'll really like the service, go and listen." And so, yeah, we were looking for a home. There were a couple of us, and I came here and I stayed. And why? Why did I stay? I loved the way that Rob pulls from a variety of sources, because that speaks to how I have to engage with people on a regular basis, and how one can hold a line of faith, but not in a way that is hard and uncompromising and inelegant. And when I'm dealing with people, I have to find that elegant way of navigating different religions, different faiths, in a way that attracts but doesn't repel, holds a line but doesn't cause offense. And yeah, I found that. I also found people on the pews who are actually making a difference, which is what I think, if we've received much, then where is our response to that? So I stayed for those two reasons and found a home, basically.
And were part of that home for, I think, a few years, and then your international COVID experience and emigrating to Scotland happened. But I think you're a wonderful example of why we do this kind of thing, you know, both with the, I suppose, the interviews and the virtual church, is that you're part of the international RUC diaspora who remain part of our community, even though from a distance. And, you know, has it been important to you, the remaining connected this way?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I said to Rob, please don't give up. You know, if you want to go on sabbatical, you must do a whole lot of podcasts in advance and keep them on file. No, it's been huge. You know, when you're out isolated, and I mean, I've been a refugee twice in my life. And when you're isolated from your tribe, for want of a better word, to have that hand to hold that's human is huge. To have that sense of you're connected to something, you're not completely disconnected, is huge. So it's been a literal lifesaver, so much so that when Neil came out in June this year, we met Rob and Tina for a meal. They looked him over and pronounced him a good egg. Worthy of this. And when I spoke to, because church isn't a thing in the UK. It's like all these buildings are empty. You're lucky if you can find 6 people. They've been turned into other stuff. So the church that we managed to find to get married in is Methodist, but there were like 6 people there. Lovely minister and her husband. But I said to them, with the greatest of respect, you don't know us from a bar of soap, you know, would you mind if Rob beamed in? So Rob was going to podcast the wedding service, and you don't know it yet, but you lot are all going to do a music item for me so that I can have Africa at the wedding. But that's part of the diaspora of, I'm here, I'm not here, but I still belong. It's been huge.
Well, I hope you'll continue to belong somehow and remain connected. I know you've also been a generous supporter of this church, and not just for that reason, but to just remain part of the
Yeah.
international community
Yeah.
of people who maybe carry our RUC and its values and its ethos with them wherever they go.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, thank you for the interview today.
Pleasure.
And so everyone can get to know you a bit better. I know many people already do, but some
Yeah.
may not.
Yeah.
And hope we can remain in touch. And good
Yeah.
luck with the new plans, the new life in the new city with the new man
Thank
and
you.
the new country.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Kathi.